Okay, everyone, it's 11 o'clock and I'm gonna go ahead and get started with this meeting. The first thing I want to say is Happy New Year to everybody, and I appreciate everyone actually changing the time. Usually we have this at 1, but we're gonna have it at 11 this year. So I appreciate you adjusting your time. So thank you so much. So just to introduce ourselves, I'm Councilmember Angela Lawson. You guys know me, I'm the Visor Chair again. You guys have to deal with me again, but I always love this committee. And then Councilmember Jurinsky could not be here. She's the vice chair. And then we have Councilmember Hancock, and she's one of our newest members. So she's going to be learning as we go. I'm so happy she's going to be on this committee because we have some more different input and things like that. So Councilmember Hancock is here. I know Councilmember Hancock knows everybody, but if we could just to explain a little bit, Councilmember Hancock, we have city staff from different areas come into these meetings virtually if you have questions about the legislation or anything like that. So you know everybody, I'm pretty sure you know George, you know Judge Day, Chief Jewel, Jessica, Kendall, and then we got Scott, and you know Liz, Kathy, and then we're gonna have a new a new city staff member start because Cindy, do you want to give out the news?
I retire end of March. So, thank you. And Key is going to be taking over for a bit until we find a permanent type thing.
So he's going to be helping us out right now.
And you work with Marshall.
Right. Right. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We have no consent items. Councilmember Hancock, do you approve the minutes of 11/15/24? Okay, yes, we'll go ahead. Okay, we're going to do our state legislative update. Peggy, Peggy, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Peggy, thank you so much for being online. Could you just we have a new member, Councilmember Hancock. Could you please just tell her who the team is and your firm,
bet.
just to give her a little background?
You bet. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Apologies for not being there in person or on camera. Our team is at the Boots and Business event, kicking off the stock show this morning. So I will just be on phone, but we have been able to meet with Councilwoman Hancock. She's been so helpful in talking about the vehicle registration legislation. So I'm excited to work with her on the committee. We have been representing City of Aurora for probably almost 10 years. And our team consists of myself, Tatsi Reese, and Cammie Grant. And we usually divvy up some of the topic areas depending on what some of the big issues are for the session. So you'll be able to work with all of us and hear from all of us on a fairly regular basis. But excited to be here. I did hear you say, Councilwoman Lawson, that we have 118 days left, and I'm glad we're not the only ones counting. It's going to be an interesting, tricky session, but we will get through it, and looking forward to representing Aurora yet again this year. Just wanted to kind of go over a couple kind of high-level issues that we've seen that I think are going to set the tone for the session. We've already had 3 vacancy committees. We've got 3 new members of the legislature just this week. John Carson is representing Douglas County. He replaced Senator Van Winkle. Iman Judah, who was a representative, is now in the Senate, replacing Senator Buckner. And Matt Ball, who is new in the legislature, is taking over for Senator Hansen's seat. So we will have 1 more vacancy at least to replace Iman Judah's House seat. So should have that done sooner rather than later. And then hoping we'll have a full team at the legislature ready to go. As you've read, there's a big budget shortfall at the state. We're about $670 million in the hole. So really that's going to set the tone for a lot of issues this year. Anything that has any sort of fiscal note is going to be problematic and really have an uphill battle. Anything that is a new program will be difficult. And the legislature will really be focused on trying to find ways to fill that $670 million gap. So that'll really, I think, really frame the legislature this session. And then right out of the gate, the Senate Majority Leader introduced the Labor Peace Act legislation, Senate Bill 5. And this changes how unions are formed and membership is determined in Colorado. Colorado is fairly unique in that we have a second vote requirement of unions. So if 75% of voters determine that the union should be created, then everybody feeds into it. But the labor organization in Colorado really wants to get rid of that second vote. The governor is trying to push for some sort of compromise. Because the unions want to get rid of that second vote, I'm not really sure what that compromise would look like, but that will be a big issue this session. Also, the governor has been working on spinning off Pinnacle. And as you recall, Pinnacle is the workers' comp provider of last resort. So companies that maybe have a tough time getting traditional insurance are able to go to Pinnacle and get insurance from them. The governor wants to allow Pinnacle to provide other products besides just workers' comp and operate in multiple states. For that, they would pay back the state a certain amount of money. The numbers that are being floated around are about 100 million for the next 5 years. A lot of skepticism from legislators on this one. So this will be another big discussion item for the session. And then we have a slew of local government bills that we expect to see. We will definitely see a municipal court sentencing bill that Representative Mabry and Senator Amable are bringing, which caps the maximum sentence for incarceration for a municipal violation to that of a comparable state law crime. This is going to be a big issue that I know CML has expressed concern with already. I imagine we're going to probably have some concerns with that bill moving forward. Also, Senate Bill 2 has been introduced. This is a modular home legislation coming from the governor's office. And it creates a technical advisory committee within the Division of Housing to develop regional codes for modular homes. And the regional codes would supersede local codes. We will also see transit RTD reform. It's going to focus on frequency, reliability, ridership, collaboration with local governments, but not have that governance piece that was such a big controversial issue last year. And then a couple bills, the CML initiated legislation around municipal courts for failure to appear. And certainly we have our bill around vehicle registration that we're working on. We expect several bills on construction defect, both a construction defect reform bill that will look at a statewide warranty. May also look at prejudgment interests as well as negligence per se. And then there's a competing bill that the trial bar is bringing that is probably not one that the business community and development are going to support. And then we will see some regulatory reform. But again, because of the fiscal notes that might be attached to it, that one may be a little bit tricky to get through. So lots expected this session. But we you know, it's kind of a slow start in that we've already gotten 126 bills introduced, but the first week or two, they do these SMART Act hearings where they go through and hear from various departments on what's going on in the department and what their priorities are. So It's a little bit of a slow start, but we've already got a slew of bills that we have in the system, and we'll start reviewing. And I imagine, I think Liz has got a few bills actually that she wants to make recommendations for this time, but happy to take any questions.
And I want to say that Mayor Kaufman is here as well. So Mayor Kaufman, did you have a question?
Yeah, on the legislation on failure to appear, do you know what that does? Does that say that it's not an arrestable offense, or do you know what that does, the bill does?
Yeah, I mean, the idea behind it is for those folks that don't appear in court repeatedly, like 10, 12, 15 times, that after a certain number of violations where they don't appear, the judge has the discretion to issue a surety bond or a cash bond to hold individuals. And the idea is that people are really taking advantage of the failure to appear and that there's no enforcement involved. So this tries to put a reasonable amount of teeth in the law so that it's not overbearing, but does allow the judge to have some discretion.
I'm just wondering, in what world is failure to appear 12 times
Oh,
judged?
I know.
Well, and I don't know if this is one that Liz is gonna put forth before the committee
Not in
today,
today's meeting,
not today.
but in the future.
We can, I think it's not been introduced yet.
Okay.
Correct. That's right.
Rep. Soper is, I think, the only person on the bill right now. The language on that bill, as it stands in draft form, is that the court can't take action in the way of requiring a monetary bond, cash surety bond, unless there's been 5 prior failure to appears. And so that's the language as it stands right now. I know Delta has proposed some amendments to that specific state statute because of the concern of failure to appear. I don't know if this is the first attempt to address that Delta's concerns, along with, I think, a lot of court's concerns. One concern that I have, and I think that I can express on behalf of other judges, I don't want to speak for them, but we've had conversations about it, is that particular section of the state statute, there may be concern that particular section that will allow the court, specifically municipal courts, to require a monetary bond, cash or surety bond, could be interpreted that doesn't apply to municipal courts, and that municipal courts could not require a cash or surety bond under those 6, I think, provisions of the statute. And so my proposal was, and I think with some of the other judges' support, would be that be clarified to where that particular part of the state statute would apply to municipal courts, that we would have those tools in our toolbox to address failure to appears, whatever number that they land on, if it's two prior failure to appears, 3, 4, 5, but the language as it stands right now, as proposed, is 5 prior failure to appears that Rep. Soper is adding to that
Mayor
bill.
Kaufman?
Judge, is the intent to tighten it up, to have better enforceability, or what's the intent of this?
Well, I think it's to put an actual number in the statute as to the failure to appears, to kind of set forth within the statute when the court can act. So it's, I guess the thought is providing some clarifying language to the state statute. That's probably the best that I can say. I've been a part of those specific conversations. Hopefully we'll be invited sometime to the table at those, but at this point we haven't been.
He's from Grand Junction, I think.
Soper's from Grand Junction, yep.
And then Councilmember Hancock too, the committee does for most like all the time. We have to, of course, get the vote up, and I'm pretty sure we always have Judge Day go down and testify and be involved in conversations because he is with the municipal court. So he's been doing that for many years. So, yeah.
Just a note on that bill. So we are looking into the occurrences of failure to appear and what the likelihood of that. So Scott and I in IT, as well as our courts, we're working to collaborate and gather that data for some of the discussions we've had with CML on this bill.
And I think other jurisdictions are as well.
Yes, they are.
Great, thank you.
Do you have any other further questions?
That-
Okay, and then Peggy, thank you so much. I did listen to a little bit of the governor's state of the state, so I did hear some of the things. I know that he's mentioned some of the priorities like the juvenile caps, bed space, and then the mayor along with the other two mayors of the largest cities, had some priorities as well. So we'll be discussing those as we move forward. So I really do appreciate this. Is gonna be a very interesting, session. I know it's gonna be a lot of public safety bills as well. I will be interested in the construction defect because whenever the trial lawyers and they have these competing bills, it's gonna, I hope that maybe we can get something passed. So, yes, Mayor.
Sure. And Liz Rogers negotiated, the mayor's thing with,
Oh, okay,
Colorado Springs and with
Right.
Denver, so
okay. Well, thank you, Liz, for
I
that.
just-
My pleasure.
she told me where.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you, Liz.
Very stressful.
Okay,
Yeah,
well, thank you, Liz,
Yeah.
for doing the work of the mayor. So, okay, so thank you so much, Peggy, and we look forward to working with you and seeing you soon, and have a great day today.
Thanks, you guys. Have a good one.
Okay, did you have any other questions?
No.
Okay, so now we're gonna go to our federal legislative update. Lori, we have a new member,
good morning.
Councilmember Hancock. So if you could
Hi,
just
good morning.
introduce your
Nice to
firm and
meet you.
just give a little background before we get started with your update.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. It's so nice to meet you, City Councilwoman. Um, I've been working with the city for about, I think, 8 to 10 years now, along with my colleague Rich Gold. Holland and Knight is a law firm. Our biggest office is in DC. That's where our lobbying practice is, but we also have an office in Denver as well. And so Rich is in charge of the lobbying practice, and I work with him, and we represent a number of local governments across the country, transportation agencies, and water utilities and port authorities. Prior to joining Holland and Knight, I worked on the Senate for about 10 years, serving for several Republican senators, and then joined Holland and Knight after my boss retired. So really enjoy working with the city and look forward to meeting you in person one day, hopefully soon. And Happy New Year, everyone. So I was going to give a quick update of what's going on here in DC. Congress swore in the new members on January 3rd. Speaker Mike Johnson was voted in again as Speaker. There were some back and forth. He didn't have the votes at first, but two Republican House members switched their vote, so he was sworn in. We have a new majority leader in the Senate, John Thune. He is a member from South Dakota. As you probably saw in the press, the former majority leader, Mitch McConnell, decided to step down as majority leader, and he's going to soon retire. The House and Senate have been very busy this week. They have been working on, first, they passed the Lakin Riley bill. You probably have seen this in the press. The House passed it earlier this week, I believe on Tuesday. It was named after a University of Georgia nursing student who was killed by an immigrant. And so this bill passed overwhelmingly in the House with 48 Democrats in support. It's expected to also pass in the Senate today with bipartisan support as well. And just as a reminder, this requires DHS to take into custody any migrants who have entered the United States illegally if they have been charged or arrested or convicted of burglary, theft, larceny, or shoplifting. Next week, the Senate is going to be very busy with their confirmation hearings. They want to try to get as many nominees confirmed as possible. The nominee for Department of Transportation Secretary, the nominee for HUD, the nominee for Department of Interior, and the nominee for EPA, and lastly, the nominee for USDA. And I met with Kathy and Marshall and their team at Aurora Water earlier this week, and they're working on some questions related to the environment and related to drought that we're going to ask our senators to ask the Secretary of Interior, Doug Burgum, and then also the USDA Secretary nominee as well. So follow up with me, Kathy, when you have a chance, so we can talk through those questions. But this is a good opportunity to get the members on to get these nominees on the record and to understand Aurora's priorities. And our senators always do a good job of helping us with this. We're continuing to operate under a continuing resolution until March 14th. Congress is soon going to begin working on an omnibus appropriations bill that we should be able to get done before March 14th. And Congress is also working on a reconciliation package. This is going to include President-elect Trump's priorities, and they want to get it done within the first 100 days of Congress. They're going to begin drafting in February, and they hope to have it on the floor starting in the House before April. And as a reminder, this is going to be related to tax cuts, renewing President Trump's tax package, as well as some energy streamlining and some border security provisions. There could be some things on the chopping block, especially related to tax cuts. For example, on municipal bonds, that could be on the chopping block. But many of the trade associations that y'all are members of, like GOFA and NLC, are lobbying the committee staff and House and Senate offices about the importance of keeping this tax break. There also could be some rescission of Inflation Reduction Act, otherwise known as IRA funding that has not been obligated. The House drafted a memo this morning that says a bipartisan infrastructure law money will not be on the chopping block and will not be used as a pay for this package. Which I thought is great news, because I know y'all have utilized this funding and I hope to continue to utilize this. So that was a lot. So I'm going to open it up for questions for y'all.
Councilmember Hancock,
I have none at this time.
Mayor, do you have any comments or questions?
Yeah, Lori, I've got a couple things.
Okay.
Now, we don't have a date for our trip to Washington yet, do we?
No,
It's
Liz and I have been
first.
working on that.
It's likely gonna be the first week of April. We're gonna send that out next week.
So just a heads up on a couple of things, and I really need to talk to the committee here about them. But since we're having a meeting now, we have land that is, City of Aurora owns about 4 acres on the Institute's medical campus that is not part of our joint relationship, part of the Fitzsimmons Innovation community with the university. This is just our land that is deed restricted by the U.S. Army when they transferred it to us. And I think that those deed restrictions are not time limited, and we'd like to get them lifted so that area can be redeveloped. Once we have our resource navigation center set up, we'll no longer need that for the Aurora Day Resource Center. So we want that land to be, that 4 acres to be redeveloped. And so we'll get you a memo as to what those deed restrictions are. But if you can point us in the right direction, so maybe during our visit, we'll talk to some folks about how to get how to get those lifted so that that area can be redeveloped. And then the other thing, we have formally adopted kind of an iteration of a work first strategy. Jessica could probably elaborate this on more, that on the operating side, that's not recognized, I think, by the federal government. It's just housing first. And so if we could start the process of at least pointing us in the right direction, how do we get that change in federal policy to reflect broaden it, not just to housing, but to add in our philosophy in terms of work first. So we're not pure work first, but kind of our iteration of work first strategy, where we can get reimbursement.
Absolutely. I'll follow up with Liz on the deed, but I was going to include HUD as one of our meetings for the group. Hopefully, Scott Turner will be confirmed by then. He seems to have bipartisan support. And I believe y'all met with him when he was at White House Intergov and during Trump's first administration. He oversaw the Opportunity Zone program. So he should hopefully remember the city, but I definitely was going to include that as one of our meetings. We could discuss.
I don't know if
this
it's
issue.
statutory or can be administratively changed.
Exactly, right.
And then Jessica, did you want to say something? I gotta,
I was just gonna note that the second piece about HUD is highlighted in our federal priorities in here, and I think
Right.
well laid out to.
Oh, on the,
It's
the federal.
in our federal priorities, yeah,
But the E
it
was-
says broadening the definition and then allowing for other types of programs to be funded
Right, but the
federally.
deed is not, so we'll probably.
No, no, no.
Information on that to Twitter. And then Councilmember Hancock, usually every year we have a federal lobbying trip. It's about a 2-day trip, 2.5-day trip. And we go and we meet with our federal delegation, but we also go to all the departments. I mean, it's fast paced. So that's what this is about, to basically advocate for our federal priorities. So kind of giving you an update, and you'll get more information on that if you're able to go, which I hope you will be.
Yes.
Okay,
oh, it is like.
go ahead, Mayor.
So I understand that Congressman Jason Crow got some language in the National Defense Authorization Act. I think working with some other members about the F-16s at Buckley Space Force Base. I don't know if you're in that. I don't know where that is in the process in terms of with the Senate.
The NDA yet was passed and signed into law, but let me find it and see what was included in the final conference report.
Okay.
They passed it before they left in December.
I don't remember. I'll double check as well, because I don't remember the F-16 issue, but I know that Buckley got funding for their energy grid and infrastructure utility project in that. So yeah, we'll check in on that.
Also, we'll get more information on that for you.
Okay, right.
Okay, thank you so much, Lori. I know
Thank you.
that because of our time schedule, we'll probably only be able to see you once a month, but we'll definitely get updates via Liz. But I look forward to seeing you in DC this year.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Have a great day. Okay, so our next thing is we're gonna go over our 2025 state and federal priorities. Liz.
Yes. So these priorities have been put together in conjunction with meetings from departments, and also what I've been hearing from you all as mayor and council of things that you want to see changed or things that have been important to you throughout the year. So with this is particularly starting at our state first. So looking at what state changes we want to make in the legislature. So I'm going to do a broad overview of them. And then if you have any questions, we can go into further detail. So regarding housing and homelessness, construction litigation reform is a big priority for us. It was also in the mayor's priority, and the governor mentioned it in his state of the state as well. We are very optimistic that this will be addressed this year, and it's something that we can see to have for increasing our housing supply. In addition to that, also opposing any preemption of our local zoning laws or local building codes is going to be really important as we continue on with that trend. And then lastly, for housing and homelessness, ensuring ongoing funding for the navigation center from state or different state agencies that can be allocated to us. In public safety, so we have our motor vehicle registration bill, which is our top priority. In addition to that, we will also be re-looking and exploring possession of weapons by previous offenders and increasing penalties for defacing and stealing firearms. Another one that we have is looking to how we can better explore street racing statewide in the legislature, where that's a legislative task force, higher penalties. So kind of beginning those discussions to hopefully build some legislation on that next year. And then lastly, for public safety, increasing the juvenile bed cap, again, part of the 3 mayor priorities, also something that the governor has allocated additional funding to in his budget. Infrastructure, just increasing funding for infrastructure improvements, for increasing density, especially centering around public transit, bus rapid transit, and expansion of RTD lines. For tax and licensing, addressing the utility and distribution of the cigarette stamp tax revenue for municipalities. And then also in conjunction with the governor, opposing unfunded and administratively burdensome regulations on the city, where I think we've seen in the past couple of years, we have more and more reports that we have to do as a municipality to the state. So how can we better streamline those, remove, what might be outdated, and be able to get back some staff time and funding. And then lastly, for water, one of their big priorities right now for the state is to support backflow prevention device requirements. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
The good news is, and I referenced Bill F in here, that the interim committee had worked on to do a legislative fix for an error of last year that mistakenly made a requirement for plumbing licensure for certified backflow assembly testers. And so in Bill F has been introduced. It is House Bill 25-1077. And I think what might be kind of the cleanest and easiest if I bring that specific bill number to you next FSIR for a recommended support position.
Okay.
So, but we are well on our way for that bill.
So are there any questions on the state priorities, any changes that we would like to see, or would you like to approve these to be moved forward to study session Monday?
Yes, Councilmember Hancock.
Regarding the beds, are we going to support, taking the lid off completely?
Well, that would be really great. I don't think that's essentially in the cards.
It's not,
Yeah.
We have to kind of
appetite's
do a
not for it.
step. Yeah.
So we're stepping up to it.
Yeah,
We're not
yeah.
gonna rip the Band-Aid
Yeah,
off.
and I think the wins, Councilmember Hancock, just, and then Liz, I'll let you respond. The wins are really important. So I know that's what we want to do, but if we can get any wins in moving up the cap, I think that's better than just us forcing this. Okay, just remove the whole thing. So, because we have other jurisdictions on board as well. So
So the cap is what?
it's, yeah, I think it is. Could you, Joel, do you know what it is? I thought it was 250.
Yeah, statewide,
Statewide.
Yeah,
Yeah,
We big numbers.
our portion is
much,
very
much
minimal.
smaller. Yeah.
So if we
Yeah,
increase
20
it,
beds, yeah.
so the governor wants allocated a certain amount of funding to increase the bed space. I'm not exactly sure at the end of the day what the number will specifically be,
Yeah.
but it is important, I think, that, you know, we are taking steps towards getting what we want with this legislature, and I think you'll see that in another bill that I'm gonna be talking about later. They're not as interested in being so punitive or removing the bed cap entirely. It's just not what the delegation in charge of the legislature wants to see. So I think we can take the wins where we can, small steps towards the ultimate goal that we want, and we're gonna have a little bit more success that way than just straight up advocating for the removal, because it's just not gonna happen for us. I'm so sorry to say. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Has there been any discussion about, I know there was in prior years, about being able to move some of the beds from different jurisdictions to other jurisdictions?
So we can do that now. Yeah, but I mean, one of the problems with that is we're putting kids and then they're like
Oh, no,
hours from their house.
okay, no, I thought that they could transfer allocation.
That we can share,
Yes.
but it's a give and take based on capacity, based on if we have another area that's not using beds, then they will share those with us, but the cap remains the same. So
Do we have to send the detainee over to that jurisdiction? Or can we-
I think that's the case. I
Oh,
think
we
we
do.
actually have to visit.
It's not a sustainable model, I would say. Like, I mean, the increase is what is really
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And then I just have a question for the priorities, Liz, and I know I brought this up to you, and I want to maybe get Chief Jules' opinion. I know that in Colorado Springs, they're thinking about doing some initiation of some legislation on smash and grabs. And I know we don't have as many as in Colorado Springs does, they have a ton. But is that something that we should consider to maybe bring to our committee for consideration? I know I had asked Liz to maybe see if the chief would weigh in on that, but I know it's something that's it's happening a lot in Colorado Springs with juveniles. But I know that we probably don't have as much, but I'm wondering, is that something that we should also maybe get behind as well? So if you can't answer me today, I might want to consider that, adding that to the priorities.
Yeah, I'd like to do a little bit of research. I'll contact
Okay.
Colorado Springs and see what they're doing.
Okay,
And then kind of
and then
figure
maybe
out-
check with the chief, and I don't
Yep.
know how many smash and grabs we have. I know it's bad in Colorado Springs, and it's with juveniles. They're stealing cars and then ramming into businesses.
Yeah. Yeah, we do have some of that. I don't think it's something that I'd consider to be out of control at any means, but it is something we do experience.
Okay,
Yep.
could you just check with that
Yep,
and see if
got
that could be something we should maybe get behind? Maybe that might not be a priority, but it could be something that we should maybe support with our law enforcement. Because although we don't have it as much, it still occurs.
Sure.
So,
But, Madam Chair,
Yes.
are you referring to large groups of, say, young people that descend on a store? Or just the ones and two
but
people?
what's happening in Colorado Springs, it could be in abundance. It's juveniles or whatever, they're stealing a vehicle and they're ramming into a
Oh.
business to steal items.
But we do have that. I mean,
We do have
big
that.
stores and all that.
Yeah.
Liquor stores,
Liquor stores.
it seems to be
Okay.
predominantly what
Yeah.
it is.
I mean, I mean, if you would like to run it by Chief Chamberlain, I would consider that to be something we should maybe take a position on.
I will say, I think taking a position would be ideal, but if we want to put that in the priorities, if we would have to decide to add that because it's going to go to study session for a vote on Monday. So we would have to then re-bring it back to a study session to add that in. Just want to make you aware that that's the process we would have.
Well,
for that.
Councilmember Hancock, what do you think? Should we just?
We can always do a legislative position too,
Okay,
like to help support Colorado Springs.
but
in addition.
we have it as well, but let's just go that route.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted
In
to
the
bring it
interest
up.
of time and
Yeah,
speed.
And then, I mean, just because it's not in the priority list doesn't mean we can't go testify or we can't actively engage in other ways as well. So we'll bring that up.
Okay, Jill, that might be something for consideration, because I think that is an important, if the bill is drafted and legislated, and depending on what it has in it, I think that would be something that our police department should support in the city.
I-
Because, I mean, it's an issue.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's only a matter, I mean, those are the types of things that are very cyclical and sporadic and kind of trend based. So regardless of whether or not we're experiencing it now, it's only a matter of time, right? Until you have a career, somebody that's going and doing a bunch of these in a short period of time. So I think we would absolutely support some kind of legislation there. So, but I'll check with the chief.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so
And then would you guys like to vote to move forward with the state priorities?
I move to move them forward to the study session. Councilmember.
And I'm in agreement, I second that.
Okay, thank you so much, Liz.
Thank you. Next one. These are the federal priorities. So a little bit different in tone than our state ones, a little bit broader. I think as we move forward in seeing what the goals of the administration are, we can further detail these in the coming years as well. But as I mentioned, these are also created and drafted and aligned with what we've been hearing from you all and what we've been seeing from the department as well. The most notable change in this is I did meet with Buckley Space Force Base to discuss what they would like us to advocate on their behalf for. So these priorities do come directly from them and what they've asked us to do moving forward. So going through the top line items, and then we can get into further discussion. So for Buckley Space Force Base, keeping the Space Force headquarters in Colorado, additional funding for Buckley in the National Defense Authorization Act to assist in directing future missions to the base and expanding their infrastructure, specifically along the eastern side of the base. That's something they're really looking into. And then in addition, they asked us this year to see if there's any way we can talk to HUD or help them address military and family housing needs. So either expanding deed restrictions to specifically for veterans or like veterans allocations and funding with HUD and DOD. That's something they really want us to look for, as a lot of their a lot of the families are struggling to find housing that's affordable for them. Moving forward to housing and homelessness, as Jessica mentioned before, looking into incorporating alternative methodologies to get funding from HUD for other than housing first models. So we've kind of discovered as self-driven or self-sufficiency pathways, but essentially looking to get funding for more housing or for work first types of programming. In addition to that, we would like to see HUD do some income restrictions and rate calculations, in addition to investing in land banking programs, revising income restrictions as we do live in a high cost of living area. So as we see these costs of living going up, HUD has not been increasing their rates in a comparative manner. We want to see some adjustments in that. When it comes to infrastructure and economic development, we want to, again, see additional funding opportunities such as continuation of BIL funding or any additional funding the Trump administration would have for public transportation and key economic corridors. In addition to that, one of the other things that we're really looking into is seeing how the new administration can remove some barriers when it comes to applying for funds or when it comes to having to do all of these extensive environmental reviews. How can we scale that back or make them a little bit more aligned, as they are a huge cost for us and can hold up development with having to do a lot of that reporting. In terms of public safety, again, supporting programs to invest in police, fire, and behavioral health, specifically looking at increasing funding for crime reduction technology. I know drones is a really big thing that our police have talked about, so we really want to see that, as well as funding for staffing. as that always remains a challenge, and any federal funds we can get to help staff our department is going to be integral. And then in addition to that, also supporting funding for youth violence prevention. So we have our SAVE program. We did receive a federal grant this past year for it. Unfortunately, we haven't heard too much from the Trump administration on what they're planning to do for anything regarding juvenile youth violence prevention. So I wanted to keep that a little bit open so we can have that discussion and see what they're gonna go for. But I think for the programs that we have here at the city are a great representation of what we can do with more funding. In tax and licensing, addressing disparities between local banking regulations for cannabis. So last year we advocated for marijuana to be moved from a Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 drug, which would ease up a lot of the banking restrictions, and that happened. So that was great. So of course, this is still an ongoing problem where we're taking steps to achieve our goal. So the next thing would be introducing legislation to allow banking and ease those restrictions so that our industry can have more legality. In addition to that, looking at expanding tax exempt advanced refundings for municipalities, as well as addressing unfunded and administratively burdensome compliance regulations. Another thing the Trump administration had previously done was this effort of reducing regulatory red tape. So we want to see that similar as we've been doing at the state level, at the federal level as well. That is a time and cost saving for us here as a city with our staff. And then for water, we have our water conservation rebate tax parity. And then again, addressing water affordability and reducing regulatory burden when it comes to the reporting requirements that we've seen under the Biden administration. I know Kathy and I have been talking about this a lot, but we've seen a lot of regulations come through water that are anticipated to be heavily reviewed by the new administration and potentially changed. So we want to make sure that we can weigh in on that. But again, I don't think we've heard exactly there's a lot of mixed information going on in this space. So we want to make sure that we're at the table just to see what's going on, what are they going to do, and how is that going to impact us. If you want to talk more about this priorities, I'll let you.
We talked about the reducing regulatory burden being a little bit more specific with PFAS. But as Liz said, we wanted to be a little bit more nimble because we don't know exactly what's coming with any rollbacks or reviews. And but that one's a good one. In the Water Conservation Rebate Tax Parity Act, that one's been out there for a number of years. Our national colleagues, our national water user entities really want to push on this one this year. So wanted to highlight that, stress that one. So I think we can get that one across the finish line.
Happy to take any questions or comments on these priorities.
Questions?
When you talked about water, thank you, take your chair. When you talked about water, PFAS was the first thing that came to my mind because being on the water committee last session, that was a huge barrier. And so that you're thinking the appetite might be to relax some of those things, or you're not really sure right now.
Possibly, and one of the pieces of legislation that was introduced last session, and hearing that'll be introduced right away again this next session, is the PFAS CERCLA liability exemption language that we would like to support. But if they do roll back some of the PFAS rulemaking that was done last spring, we still would like that CERCLA liability exemption as a long-term permanent fix. And so we have to be watching both in the regulatory area as well in the legislative area. So we made it a little bit broader.
It's good to hear.
Mayor, do you have any questions before we take a vote on moving these forward?
Councilmember Hancock had talked to me about the marijuana industry and that there was a problem and that they were not coming very available.
Would you like federal governors to be a federal priority?
But Mayor, do you have any questions on the priorities? Okay, and then Councilmember Hancock, do you approve the city position to move this forward for the study session?
I do.
Okay, I do as well.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Oh, I do have one question.
Yes.
I'm moving these forward. But what about that, the fast and it's not the fast areas, but
Yes. So
what about what's
that's
going on?
so, I don't know if that's gonna actually be introduced again, but I think we had talked, I think, a little bit about the Fast and the Furious with street racing. And if we do it federally, we could wait a lot longer for any actions to be taken.
Okay,
And I think since we have that in our state priorities, we could address it a little bit faster as a
okay,
state.
no problem.
And have a little bit more impact on what legislative recommendations could come out of a task force relating to that. And it really it narrows it down more on our state specifically and the impact that we could be and the challenges that we are seeing more specifically than doing it at a big federal level.
Okay.
Where we might not be able to have as much input on what any kind of task force would determine.
Okay.
Here we have a little bit more of a say that what we want to do. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
If I could, so on the housing issue with base, affordable housing issue, there's I think a schedule of, kind of, not really reimbursement, but a housing allowance.
Yeah, the age.
So I assume that maybe it's not adjusted properly for this area.
So the problem that they're having is BAH will increase and then everyone's rent will also increase in accordance with BAH. So regardless of what happens, it's still a challenge because the rates will increase for rent the same as the rates for BAH. So it makes it a challenge because if landlords or people who rent to military families keep raising their rate like that, they're not going to have any additional funding or use that BAH for like their utility bills or anything additional like that. So that's kind of like the issue that they're seeing is like it's BH is increasing, but so is the rent. So it doesn't like it just kind of negates
Well, we're a
itself.
larger market, so I think a base with a smaller community is probably, they're more aligned, whatever the increase is, but we're a larger market, so
Yeah.
should be a little bit better. Okay.
Okay, one point.
Go ahead.
With that, it just triggered a thought. Military families going out in full market economy to rent apartments or homes.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting because working in housing myself, it's just interesting to see that when military families go out to secure housing, there's a cap on how much they can have when they go out. And so they get an increase, but then the
Yeah, but then
rate
it
goes up.
matches.
And so they're
they-
not really gaining anything. They're just-
Exactly. So say if it's a family of 4 and they need a
3-bedroom.
3-bedroom home that's more rent than their BAH would cover,
Yeah.
that can be a struggle. Especially since the base is trying to draw more missions here. They want to make sure that the housing remains affordable and attainable for the people that they're trying to bring in. It is a bigger concern when people are coming from out of state, they see our housing prices, the cost of housing for rental, and it's like a big sticker shock for them. So they're trying to adjust that in support mostly of expanding the mission to bring people.
I think we were competing for Space Force headquarters, which I never thought we'd get, but we did it anyway. We got dinged on housing costs, and we got dinged on public education. So those 2 areas. So they did recognize, DOT did recognize that we were higher than normal in terms of housing costs.
And there's no building on the base. Is that right?
What's that?
No housing.
There's some housing on the base,
Oh, yeah.
but it's usually pretty full.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So we'll move to our next item on state bill positions. So Liz.
Still me. Okay. As the legislature is now started, there's been a multitude of bills that have been dropped that we are still reviewing, that we hope to bring forward for the next meeting. But I wanted to get a couple of things in front of you guys now, that we can take some positions on. So the first thing, just for how this works is the committee can take the positions and then I will report that at study session. At study session, the council can vote to change the position, but once the position is here, we as staff can then go advocate for the position of the city that is determined here. So we cannot, as a city, advocate for bills that we don't have official positions on, either support or oppose. So any questions on that? I just want to make that
No, understood.
great. Okay, so the first bill, I don't normally take drafts for positions because I am very cautious of things changing. However, this is an exception as this is our draft that we're doing for local authorities in Forest Vehicle Registration. This is a bill that we as staff have been working on for the better part of the year regarding how to address the lack of vehicle registration in terms of allowing our courts to have the citations written to them, as well as creating a judicial discretion amnesty program. We want to bring this for a support position so we can continue to advocate for our legislators to support this bill and continue to have effective working conversations.
And Councilmember Hancock, just formally, I have to kind of do within a formal statement. Do you agree with the city position of support on this bill?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I do as well.
So the next bill is House Bill 25-1062, penalty for theft of firearms. So this bill would essentially change sentencing structure that if a firearm was stolen, it would make this a Class 6 felony. Currently, there is no specific statute for theft of a firearm. The history of this is last year when the city advocated for and supported the possession of weapons previous offender bill, we actually added in an amendment to include theft of a firearm in that bill. So this legislation 1062 essentially is that amendment that we wanted to see that criminalizes theft of a firearm. So we are recommending a support position for this legislation.
Questions there? Do you have any questions on the position? Okay, do you agree with taking the city position of support on this bill? I do. Okay, and I do as well.
Okay, next bill, Senate Bill 2520, tenant and landlord law enforcement. So this bill would allow municipalities to apply for the district court for the appointment of a receiver to operate multifamily residential properties when there is violations of city ordinances. I think you can see where this would be helpful for us if we have additional issues with other landlords in multifamily buildings, as we've seen this past year. With this, staff is recommending a support position. And then
Just wanted to say that we are working on a derelict and neglected ordinance locally for us as well, that would sort of complement this as well. So locally, we would be able to appoint a receiver and have things like that. And so Councilmember Sundberg has asked for that ordinance, and it's in draft form. It will be coming to council, but I just wanted to know it's kind of would be a concurrent process that we did meet with the state, with the AG on this as well. But we also want to do something locally.
Any questions?
That was going to be my question.
Okay.
What are we doing locally?
Okay,
So
Councilmember Hancock, do you agree with the city position of support on this bill?
I do.
Okay, I do as well.
wonderful, and that's all the bill positions I have today.
Alright.
These will be reported at the January 20, but not this Monday, but the following, yeah, the 27th.
Okay.
Just because we can't get them
Okay.
into the e-scribe system until the following.
Okay,
Okay.
all right,
That's fine.
so. Good, Kathy, water update.
Just a couple of things, for Councilmember Hancock, especially, we do, as the water department, have a state lobbying services contract with Colorado Advocates. And so that's Jeff Seaman and Steve Holdren. So if I ever need to miss an FSAR meeting, you might see Jeff in my chair. So we do have that. And then I already told you for state affairs that I'll be bringing House Bill 25-1077 next time for the backflow support. And then on the federal side, I've got some really wonderful news. In the last days of December, the Upper Colorado River Fish Recovery Program was reauthorized. So Biden signed that into law, as well as the aquatic nuisance species legislation that we had been working on for several years as well. So both of those FSAR supported, Aurora Water supporting, and so thank you very much. Those made it.
Thank you. That's great. Okay, so miscellaneous matters for consideration. Before I get into what I have to say, and then we're gonna have George talk about public testimony and legislative positions between scheduled meetings. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because we had a lot of people missing during the Pfizer meetings. And so I want to make sure that if that happens for some reason, that we have this, I want George to explain this policy and what we can do and what the chair can do in terms of making sure that we're able to have these emergency meetings or whatever is required. So go ahead, George.
So that's all addressed in the council rules. Let me go to that. It's under D3 specifically. And this is an exception for all committees. So, and it states clearly the only exception to this requirement is for FSIR. When in the opinion of the chair of the FSIR committee, it is necessary to convene an emergency meeting in order to be able to respond in a timely fashion to state or federal legislative activity. Such an emergency meeting may be held electronically or virtually after appropriate posting. So As long as notice is given, you're allowed to meet. And in that situation, I think you've taken the position, Madam Chair, to do a virtual meeting.
Right.
So,
So that just happens, Councilmember Hancock, I just wanted to explain it. You know, during the legislative session from now until May, we have these meetings and we gotta take positions. And last year, there was quite a few misses. I didn't have a quorum. And so with that, if that happens for any type of emergency, I can have this option to do this because we do need immediate action. And so I just wanted you to understand that policy. Okay. So,
Madam Chair,
yes.
George, what is a notice requirement? I'm trying to remember, is it 24 hours or more?
how long do you say I think it's 24, but how far in advance do you?
Sunshine rule or?
How far in advance do you do FSIR? Like normally?
To go
Is it
online?
1 day or 2
So we
days?
have to have the agenda out,
Special meeting.
for a special meeting.
I think it's 24 hours, but what have you normally done? I didn't know.
Yeah,
what
it's
you-
usually 24 hours, if we have a special meeting is what we've been doing. If there's anything that comes to a regular meeting, we usually still try to keep that 24-hour rule unless it's something that absolutely cannot wait for a position to be taken on.
So if you can attend, please just let me know early, just so I can prep and do everything I need to do, so we can basically have a quorum, especially, you know, with the legislative session. I mean, we have to move fast, so it's just really important for me to kind of know if someone's not gonna be here or not. So,
And by electronic, that means we can do this, everything virtually or online and do voting
we can
and
do,
for
Yep.
pieces of legislation
Yep.
that come
Yep.
up.
I can do it.
Especially in these midnight hours.
Right,
legislative things that
exactly,
happen in the
exactly.
Capitol that we have to take.
Yep, I just need to get it notified so we can have it notified within 24 hours. So
Gotcha.
if you know of anything possibly that you cannot attend, because I really do need a quorum, so. So I just wanted to address that. Okay. No
And
problem.
you also wanted me to address testimony.
Yeah, testimony as well.
So, I mean, you're all entitled to your First Amendment rights. So the issue comes is when the city or city council's taking a position that's contrary to your own position. If you go and testify against that position, you need to make it clear that you're testifying on your own personal behalf, not on behalf of the city. So as many times as you can make that clear, the better for all of you. If when in doubt, feel free to reach out to me or your fellow committee members on how they've dealt with things, but always best to err on the side of caution with that.
And just a comment on that, like I said, this is your First Amendment right to go down there. You know, you really have to specify to the people that you're talking in front of, the legislators, that this is your own, you know, not with the city positions. However, it would be nice, and I would just ask just for maybe possibly, if you're going down there testifying on any of our state things, whether you're going on this, so just to let me know, because sometimes it's kind of conceived a little bit differently by the legislators. You know, that, yes, I did go down there and testify on behalf of myself on this bill, in my opinion. But when they see you, they're like, oh, well, Councilmember Lawson, I saw such and such down there, and is that the position? So then I have to contact Liz or whatever, and we have to try to figure out how we can make sure that our position is our position. So it just makes it a little complicated for me as the chair and maybe Liz as well. So I would just appreciate that. I'm not trying to take control or micromanage anybody, but it's just helpful, especially on these priorities, that if you could just let me know, hey, I'm going down there, just so I can be prepared of what may come to me.
And the other thing, all of you, is if you disagree with the position that's
Yeah.
taken by city council, you can ask for a minority report to be done. And that's allowed under the
Yep.
council rules as well. But you have to make that specific, you know, as you're
Yep.
talking about a specific bill or whatever the position is, and we can process that for you. Sorry, can't get through that word. But that's available to you under the same rule, D3. So
Okay, so Councilmember, so just to go around, is there any comments that anyone wants to make before we adjourn the meeting? Nobody? Nobody? Okay, Councilmember Hancock, how was your first meeting?
I am looking forward to jumping in. Of course, Liz has a big giant brain, so it's really great to be able to get more out of it this year. So I'm very
Sarah, do
excited.
you have any
I
comments?
just support, Councilmember Hancock and the gummy bears.
Okay,
Thanks, Liz. Get those bakers so I can go with it.
okay,
I'll make
well,
that my
thank you,
priority.
everybody. Our next meeting is January 24th. It will be virtual at 11 PM, not 11 PM, 11 AM. And I thank everybody for being here. So have a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Appreciate it.